Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Design Under Influence, where we go deep into the underbelly of your architecture firm's IT workflows and help you create a smooth, profitable, enjoyable business where your IT is never an issue, or if it's an issue, you can get it solved. We are from Arc IT. That's what we do. We solve IT for architecture, design, engineering firms. Here with me are the smartest guys in the room when it comes to IT, Mark and Harry. And today we're talking onboarding, offboarding. Mark, Harry, how you guys doing?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you doing, Alex?
Yeah, life's good. Especially, hey, look, let's go help some people. Okay, this is where I think you need to help us identify the importance of this. We're talking about employee or contractor or team member onboarding and offboarding process. We see this being a lot. You guys see this as a big issue with our customers, and you help put together the process. So why is the process important? Why should someone have a process?
So first of all, you want it to be as seamless as possible. One of the biggest challenges for most companies bringing in new employees is having them integrate into their processes, their workflow, getting them set up, hit the ground as fast as possible. And that could be very challenging. That could involve a lot of things. It could involve purchasing hardware, setting up the hardware, transferring information to the new user. So it's a multi-layered process that could be very, very complicated and challenging. So being able to sort that process out and have it done in an orderly and timely fashion can be very, very important to a new employee's experience.
Gotcha. Mark, any color to add to that?
Yeah, I know I'm no business owner, but what I do know is that there's a large dollar amount that's invested with a new employee, and the time it takes to ramp them up and get them into full working production. One big piece of that for them to be able to do their job is having the right tools and the right hardware and everything that Harry mentioned, software, is to get that at 100% on day one. Any timing that it takes past that to get all those things in place is just going to affect the timing of when this employee can be, hit the ground running. And it's really important to have all of this done beforehand and in an orderly fashion, just like Harry said.
Yeah. And from a business owner perspective, you touched on this, Mark. It's absolutely. I mean, you grasp the concept here is like the huge investment, huge interview time. It's a risk factor bringing somebody new into the company. No matter how much time you spend interviewing, checking references, you really don't know what it's going to look like. And to give them this delightful experience where things are ready and professionally handled, and they walk in, there's their hardware, there's their logins, they can call somebody when they have a problem. Big deal. So let's pick this apart into individual components and help people put together that onboarding plan. I think maybe we'll just touch onboarding, and maybe we'll do the offboarding as its own show or its own episode, because I think unless we have, let's see how we do with onboarding. So let's just start. Let's create a recipe for people who are watching or reading us. So guys, what's the first step in a successful onboarding process? I'm writing this down.
Planning ahead of time before you actually bring anyone on is having the process in place. There's a lot of variables, like we had said, of like exactly what Harry touched on, of which direction you need to go, and having all those mapped out beforehand so there are no surprises is the most crucial piece of an onboarding, is having the policies and procedures in place right away, just in the beginning. And then you can follow those and you have a checklist of things that need to be done.
Let's say we are creating this checklist right now. What's the first step in a checklist, Harry?
Well, again, it varies. For if you're getting a new employee, it depends. Is this new employee replacing an old employee that already has a good hardware, a good computer? So in that case, you're not thinking about a computer purchase, a computer setup. In that sense, you're pretty much looking at just creating an account for that user on that computer. Again, it varies. The first step would usually be, where is this user going to be in the office? Where do they have a computer? So the physical component is usually going to be the first part.
Got it. So hardware physical component is usually part one of the checklist process. They can be, hey, once you get the checklist, maybe acquire new hardware, then you go specifications, what kind of work they do, blah, blah, blah. I get that. Existing hardware, is it still good enough? It is, then set them up, but also where they're going to sit, or, if it's a home base, do they have a desk? Do they have a microphone? If they need a microphone, whatever, right?
Correct. If it's a remote employee, then that's also a different setup. You need to get them a laptop. Do you already have one in place that you just want to repurpose? And some of our clients, what we usually do for them is we have backup workstations that are already prepped and ready to go. So in the case where a new employee comes in, we don't have to spend time prepping those workstations. We can just issue them one that's already ready.
No, that's kind of cool. All right. So let's say hardware. We can go back to glean more details out of this one. What's the second step? Let's say I figured that out. So let's say I'm bringing somebody new, right? I figured that out. I got the hardware. Next.
The next thing is more of what roles this user going to fill. So now we know that, and it also ties into the hardware, but you have to know, is this person an admin? Is it a C-level? Is it a designer? So, and then in there, you've already predetermined with your coming up with a process and procedures, what software they're going to need. So you have pre-packages that are completely ready for a designer will get Bluebeam, any of the Autodesk, SketchUp, Rhino, Enscape, Vectorworks, whatever the hardware is. And so then you're starting to narrow that down. And then it comes account setup time, across the board, Active Directory, Mail, Azure, whatever that is. And then you can start acquiring the license for Adobe, Bluebeam, whatever those are, Autodesk, and you can start creating the user accounts for said user.
Gotcha. All right. So identify a role and basically start implementing software based on that role by creating accounts, acquiring user licenses. Okay, gotcha. Those are two big, massive undertakings, but here we are, right? What follows?
Yeah. So just to piggyback off where Mark was going with that. So the next step would probably be the actual setup. But that's usually where your IT department comes in. So something else that we should probably mention is how important the communication is between the business and its IT department. Because business needs are often dynamic, they're often changing. So a new user who started last month might require something different from a user who is starting next week. So even though they might be in the same roles, there may be new software that's being introduced. So being able to keep that open line of communication with your IT department is very, very important when it comes to your onboarding process. Now, on the side of your IT department, what we do is we have forms that we send out to our clients. And these forms have this pre-filled items that they should need, whether it's a software, it's a hardware, what license it needs. We send them out to our clients and they fill that out. So they'll put in the name of the new employee, they'll put in what software is required, and they can send that in, even though we already have a pre-filled checklist of what they require. So if something is different from our already pre-filled checklist, they can send that in and be like, we also need this too. So it's having that open line of communication and a standard process that your IT department follows that's going to make that process very seamless. So the setup is the next part of it. But that setup part involves a lot, which is not particularly standard, but the communication part of it has to be standard. So you need to always, whenever you have a new employee, you send an email to your IT department saying, hey, we have a new employee, starts in blah, blah, blah date. The IT department, who already has a checklist of requirements, your onboarding requirements, what we do is we send you a form that you can then fill out with extra information, the name of the employee, what software they're going to require, and all that, and send it back to us, and we can start the setup.
Gotcha. So high-level steps, we have hardware, physical, identification, acquisition, role identification, then software based on that role, and also then the setup of the said software, with a little bit of a interesting addition by Harry, saying it needs a dynamic. So you may have set up the last employee with this checklist, but it's good to go through that checklist again and make sure if there's anything new or anything additional licenses, or that this role is slightly expanded or whatever, your IT department is on top of this. It's not like, oh, I wish we've done it, now we got to go back and do it. And, so that's great. Are those 3 steps, big steps, it, or are there other, like, is there a number 4 here? Once you do the setup, what then?
So I think one key thing, and every client's different here, Arc IT as a whole offers the service of when the new user starts to take a half hour, 45, an hour, 2 hours, whatever is needed, to sit down, whether it be virtually or in person, with the new user and go over the products and tools. A lot of clients don't take us up on this, and I wish they would, because of the benefit from it. It eliminates, again, an owner's job, and our job is to help facilitate the user getting up to speed as fast as possible. And that small training session does nothing but drastically increase the speed at which that can happen. And it's just learning the tool sets. Maybe they've worked with Google Workspace at their previous job and aren't familiar with Office, or vice versa. And for us to be able to train them on the tools that are being used in the company is invaluable for it. And I really feel that that's a big piece that Arc IT offers. And to get set up, you have to set up 2FA to their cell phone, whether it's company provided or personal. So these are the things that some people have trouble with, and we can walk them through it at a quick pace. We use a lot of third-party identity providers, Duo, for instance, and we can get that set up and get the application installed on their phone, and all that fun stuff.
Gotcha. So again, hardware, role identification, setup of the software, and then orientation is what you highly recommend to get, like, hey, here are all the things. What questions do you have? Oh, this is how you set up a 2FA. This is how you set up this and that.
Correct.
Go ahead.
Which I will also add as maybe training and feedback.
Yes. Tell me more.
Training is part of the onboarding process. So just to piggyback on what Mark was saying, so we also follow up with the user. We don't just say, hey, here's your new computer. So we walk them through the stuff. We walk them through their login, the services, the applications they use, how it integrates or how it affects the company's workflow. We explain it to them, make sure they know where their emails are, where their teams are for communication. Ask questions. What else do you need? See what they need help with, and try to guide them through it. So that training, orientation, is part of the user onboarding process, which is something that you want to happen. You want the process to be as seamless as possible. You want the user to have a good experience, which will tell them that your organization's culture is upstanding, something that's that needs to be upheld.
Gotcha. I want to talk about 2 more things. 2 more things, guys. One is the timeline. What is step 1 through step 4? Step 1 for us is hardware planning. Step 4 is orientation session, the training. What is the typical timeline that people need to be thinking about?
Now, hardware purchasing. Hardware is already in place. It may need even a full reimage, just without having to acquire hardware. A 2-week notice is ideal. And that's a good, hey, in 2 weeks we have new user A starting and we'd like to set up his services. I have his laptop for you right here. 2 weeks is great. That's comfortable for both parties. It allows for any variables that might come up to be figured out. And when it comes to when you need to acquire hardware for them, that's a big variable, because if it's an admin and they just need a machine, we have a lot of direct relationships with, third-party vendors, we can acquire a machine very quickly. But when you get into some of these crazy builds that these AEC guys and gals need, there can be overseas issues that are, preventing you from being able to acquire the hardware. And that's where as much leadway as possible. Harry, I think, mentioned it earlier, or in one of our other podcasts, planning ahead, having spares there, and having extra hardware available. So you never run into if you need something from your inventory, you take it. And then at that time, with no future hires, you order your next one. So it comes in 2-3 weeks later.
That's an excellent point. Excellent point. Because of the demands, supply issues, and how heavy some of the particular, AAC uses are, you need specialized equipment that could be, weeks out potentially. So not having a spare, not having your IT department store a spare for you might be, a little bit of a challenge, because then somebody's going to sit there for a week or two without any equipment. And then you can only start the onboarding process when you get hardware. And that looks just looks bad for retention and for all around productivity.
Correct. As early as possible, as much time as you can give your IT department to prepare. There's never going to be enough time. So what I would say is at least 2 weeks. We do get those random once in a while, an employee starting tomorrow, and then we have to just get all hands on deck and get it going. But at least 2 weeks. But anything more than 2 weeks is very, very welcome. Because even if you have a computer that's ready to go, we still need to go into that computer and make sure that it's still running well and it has no issues. So at least 2 weeks, but more than 2 weeks is preferable. Got you.
So as soon as possible. That's good. I just know, from a business owner perspective, it's just never. Somehow it never is a priority until it becomes a super priority. So once you make a couple mistakes and you look terrible in front of your key hires, you right away realize this and become a little bit more efficient with this, and you follow the process. So that's all we're prescribing here. Follow the plan, get in there early, make your organization look good. You will both benefit for years to come.
It's also very, very important for employee retention, because that first 2 weeks when employees start is usually the most challenging time for them. Everything is new, everything is different. So making it as easy as possible is also very good for employee retention. So if you want them to stick around, make that process seamless as possible.
Gotcha. 100%. So thank you, Harry. Now I need one more from each of you. Okay. So we talked about timeline. I want to see most common mistakes, or it could be disaster. It could be anything. Maybe it could be a little bit of a story without naming names. What's the most common mistake or most devastating mistake you saw, and you'd like to caution our viewers from? Maybe we'll start with you, Mark.
The biggest thing I would say, I don't really have an exact case study on it, but the biggest thing is just not having hardware in place, because it's not as big of a deal with an admin, having a new admin start, because they can, in a pinch, use a designer and AEC, laptop, a high-powered laptop. It's the flip of it. You're paying a lot of money, whether it's a lot of money in general, a lot of money for your company to bring on a new employee. And then they start and they don't even have a machine that they can run Revit or run SketchUp or run Rhino or any of these highly resource intensive applications. So then they're sitting there literally not working. And that is, like Harry was just pointing out, is bad all around, because it looks bad on the company. The company's losing money, and the person isn't getting that warm and fuzzy feeling when they're starting, that they're not important because the company wasn't prepared for them. It's a big thing. And I think Harry, what he said is absolutely so true, is that first couple of weeks leaves a big imprint on the future of that employee with the company. I know that from when I worked at Arc IT, being welcomed by Arc IT and having all the processes in place really helped.
Fantastic. Harry, what do you got as far as most common mistakes or biggest mistakes within the onboarding process that you saw that you have to solve?
So I think when in my role onboarding new users, one of the biggest challenges I've seen is having inadequate documentation. So when you're going to set up a new user, you want to make sure that everything is in place, that you know where to go to download the software, you know what licenses you need to apply, you know what permissions that user needs to be granted. So just having an inadequate workflow, an inadequate process can be very, very detrimental, which kind of falls both on your IT and the company, which is where the communication comes in place. So you guys have to both work together to make sure that you have adequate documentation and a process in place. Because once that's not there, whenever you get a new employee, it's total chaos.
Got it. So 2 common mistakes and most devastating would be missing hardware and missing steps in a process. Both result in delays and potential loss to that employee or at least their goodwill. Gentlemen, I really appreciate your time. Those of you watching or listening, if you need help from quality gentlemen like we have here and the rest of the ArcIT team, hit us up at getarcit.com. We're here to help AAC community solve their IT so you can focus on doing your great work. Build buildings. Let us take care of your piping, so to speak. Have a fantastic day, Mark, Harry. Thank you for your time. We'll see you next week.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Yeah.